The Korath battle cruiser hung in the darkness of space like a predator waiting to strike. Commander Vexnar stood on the observation deck, his 4 eyes scanning the small human vessel that drifted nearby. His scales shifted from deep purple to a satisfied red. This would be easy. They have no weapons worth mentioning, his tactical officer reported. A simple cargo ship, 12 life signs aboard. Vexnar clicked his mandibles together. The Korath were the greatest warriors in 5 sectors. They had conquered 17 species. They had never lost a war. And now the Galactic Council had given them permission to test humanity's strength. If humans proved weak, they would join the list of conquered peoples. If they proved strong, perhaps they would be worthy trading partners. Vexnar expected weakness. "Prepare the boarding party," he ordered. "Standard intimidation protocol. We will show these humans what true warriors look like." The cargo ship was called the Wandering Hope. It was old and had been repaired many times. The hull was patched in dozens of places. The engines made strange sounds when they ran too long, but the ship still flew and its crew loved it like a living thing. Captain Maria Santos stood in the cramped bridge, watching the massive Korath vessel approach. She was a small woman with gray hair and tired eyes, but those eyes held no fear. She had seen many things in her 40 years of space travel. She had faced pirates, storms, and equipment failures that should have killed everyone aboard. She was still here. "They're going to board us," her pilot said. His name was James, and he was barely 20 years old. His hands shook on the controls. He had only been with the crew for 6 months, but they had already accepted him as one of their own. "I know," Maria said calmly. "Captain, we should run, we should." "We can't outrun them, James, and we won't leave our cargo." She turned to face her crew. There were 11 of them on the bridge. Some were old, some were young. None of them were soldiers. They were mechanics, cooks, engineers, and traders. They were ordinary people doing ordinary jobs far from Earth. But they were also something else. "Listen to me," Maria said. "I know you're scared. The Korath are big and mean and they've never lost a fight, but they don't know us. They don't know what we are to each other." She looked at each face in turn. "We've been together for 3 years now. We've survived storms in the void. We've fixed this ship with tape and prayers. We've shared meals and stories and hard times. We've celebrated birthdays and mourned losses together. You're not just my crew, you're my family." Old Chen, the engineer, nodded slowly. He had worked with Maria for 15 years. He knew her better than anyone. "What do you need us to do, Captain?" "Just stay together, watch each other's backs, and remember we don't fight alone, we never fight alone." Rosa, the ship's cook, put her hand on James's shoulder. "Don't worry, boy, we've got you." James looked at her and some of the fear left his eyes. He wasn't alone. No matter what happened next, he wasn't alone. The Korath boarding party consisted of 20 warriors. They were tall, nearly 7 feet, with hard scales and multiple arms. Each one was trained from birth for combat. Each one had killed before. They wore heavy armor and carried weapons that could cut through steel like paper. They cut through the airlock like it was nothing and marched onto the cargo ship with weapons raised. Their leader was a warrior named Krathvex. He had personally killed 50 enemies in close combat. He feared nothing in the galaxy. The humans were waiting in the cargo bay, 12 of them standing in a loose group. No weapons, no armor, just soft skin and strange expressions on their faces. They looked at the Korath warriors without running, without screaming, without begging for mercy. It was strange. Krathvex almost laughed. "You are the fearsome humans," he said, his translator turning his clicks and growls into words they could understand. "You are small. You are weak. Your skin would tear under my claws. You will kneel before the Korath Empire or you will die." Maria stepped forward. She was the smallest person in the room, barely reaching Krathvex's chest, but she looked up at him without flinching. Her eyes met his 4 eyes directly. "We're not going to kneel," she said, "and we're not going to die. You should leave." The Koreth warriors made a sound that might have been laughter. The sound echoed off the metal walls of the cargo bay. Krathvex leaned down until his face was close to Maria's. His breath smelled like metal and blood. I could kill you with one hand, little creature. I could crush your skull without effort. What makes you think you can threaten me? I'm not threatening you, Maria said. Her voice was calm and steady. I'm warning you, we don't want to fight, but if you make us fight, you won't like what happens. You have no weapons. We don't need weapons. Krathvex stood straight again. This was amusing. These creatures were clearly insane. They faced 20 armed warriors and spoke of fighting. Take them, he ordered his warriors. We will show them what happens to those who defy the Korath. 2 warriors moved toward Maria. They reached for her with their clawed hands. Their scales gleamed under the cargo bay lights. What happened next confused Krathvex deeply. James, the young pilot, threw himself between Maria and the warriors. He wasn't trying to fight. He simply put his body in the way. The warrior knocked him aside easily, sending him crashing into a stack of cargo containers. But in that moment of distraction, Old Chen grabbed a heavy tool from his belt and swung it at the warrior's knee joint. The warrior stumbled. Another warrior moved to grab Chen, but the ship's cook, Rosa, tackled him from the side. She wasn't trying to hurt him. She knew she couldn't. She was just trying to get him away from Chen. Her large body hit the warrior's legs and he had to stop to push her off. It was chaos. The humans weren't fighting like soldiers. They weren't trying to win. They were just protecting each other. Every time a warrior grabbed one human, 2 more would jump in to help. They used their bodies as shields. They pulled their friends away from danger. They worked together without speaking, as if they could read each other's thoughts. Krathvex watched in growing confusion. He had seen many fighting styles in his career. He had faced enemies who were stronger, faster, and better armed than these humans, but he had never seen anything like this. A warrior grabbed the young pilot and lifted him off the ground. James struggled helplessly, his legs kicking in empty air. But instead of calling for mercy, he shouted, "Get the captain out of here. Don't worry about me." And the other humans didn't run. They moved toward the warrior holding James, not away from him, even though they were being beaten, even though they had no chance of winning. They kept coming back to help their friend. "Enough," Krathvex roared. His warriors stopped. The cargo bay fell silent except for the heavy breathing of the injured humans. Maria stood up from where she had been knocked down. Her lip was bleeding. One of her eyes was swelling shut. Bruises were forming on her arms and face. But she was still standing, and she was still looking at Krathvex without fear. "We can do this all day," she said quietly. "Every time you hurt one of us, the rest will come to help. That's what we do. That's who we are." Krathvex stared at her. Something cold moved in his chest. It was a feeling he had not experienced in many years. It was doubt. He looked around the cargo bay. His warriors were uninjured, of course. The humans couldn't actually hurt them, but the humans were still standing too, battered and bleeding but standing together, supporting each other. Old Chen had his arm around James's shoulders. Rosa was holding Maria's hand. "Report to Commander Vexnar," Krathvex said into his communicator. "We need to discuss the situation." Commander Vexnar listened to Krathvex's report with growing unease. He stood in his private chambers aboard the battle cruiser, packing back and forth while his officer spoke through the communication device. "They did not fight like warriors," Krathvex said. "They fought like— I do not have a word for it. When one was threatened, all of them responded, not with skill or strength but with their bodies. They threw themselves into danger to protect each other." "That is foolish," Vexnar said. "A warrior should protect himself first. How can you fight if you are busy saving others?" "That is what I thought, but Commander, they did not stop. We hurt them and they kept coming, not to attack us, just to protect each other. It was like fighting a single creature with 12 bodies." Vexnar's scales shifted to an uncomfortable gray. You are telling me that 12 unarmed humans held off 20 Korath warriors? No, Commander, I am telling you that we could not break them. We could have killed them, yes. We could have torn them apart, but we could not make them stop protecting each other. And there was something in their eyes. Krathvex paused. They were not afraid of dying. They were afraid of losing each other. Vexnar was quiet for a long time. In Korath society, warriors fought alone. They proved their individual strength. Helping another warrior was seen as weakness. If a Korath fell in battle, his companions would step over his body and keep fighting. That was the way of strength. But these humans, they operated on different rules. Bring the human captain to me, Vexnar ordered. I would speak with her. Maria Santos walked onto the Korath command deck with her head held high. Her injuries had been treated by the ship's medical officer, but bruises still covered her face. 2 guards walked beside her, but they kept their distance. Krathvex had told them about what happened in the cargo bay. They seemed almost nervous around this small, fragile creature. Vexnar studied her with all 4 of his eyes. She was so small, so fragile. Her bones would break like dry sticks under a Korath's grip. And yet Krathvex, who had killed 50 enemies, seemed almost frightened of her. Human, Vexnar said, I am told you and your crew fought my warriors. We defended ourselves, Maria corrected. She did not look away from his eyes. You had no weapons, no training, no chance of victory. Why did you fight? Maria smiled. It was a strange expression, soft and sad and fierce all at once. Because they were trying to hurt my people. I would die before I let that happen. That is irrational. If you had surrendered, you would have lived. Now some of your crew may be permanently injured. But we're still together, Maria said. That's what matters. We're still a family. Vexnar made a frustrated sound. I do not understand you. In Korath society, the individual is supreme. We fight for personal glory. We trust no one but ourselves. That is how we became strong. And how many friends do you have? Maria asked quietly. The question hit Vexnar like a physical blow. He realized with sudden clarity that he had no answer. Korath did not have friends. They had rivals, subordinates, and superiors. They had enemies and temporary allies, but friends. The concept was almost foreign. I have power, Vexnar said finally. I have conquered worlds. I have wealth and status and 1,000 warriors at my command. But if you fell in battle tomorrow, Maria said, how many people would risk their lives to save you? Vexnar did not answer. He already knew the truth. If he fell, his second-in-command would take his place and not look back. That was the Korath way. That was how it had always been. My cook, Rosa, weighs almost twice what I do, Maria said. She tackled a Korath warrior to protect old Chen. She knew she couldn't win. She knew she would get hurt. But Chen fixed her ship's engine last month and told her jokes to keep her spirits up during a hard voyage, so when he was in danger she didn't think. She just acted. That's what we do for family. You use that word family, but you are not related to these people by blood. Blood doesn't make family. Love does. Loyalty does. Shared hardship and shared joy and the knowledge that someone will always have your back, that makes family. Maria stepped closer to Vexnar. That's why you should fear us, Commander, not because we're strong or fast or well-armed, but because we're never truly alone. When you fight one human, you fight everyone who loves them. Vexnar's scales flickered through several colors rapidly. His mind was racing. The Korath had built their empire on individual strength. They were powerful alone, but humans were powerful together. I need to think, Vexnar said. Return her to her ship. After Maria left, Vexnar called for his tactical officer. Show me everything we know about human behavior, he ordered. Their history, their wars, their social structures, everything. What he learned over the next several hours changed his understanding of the universe. Humans, Vexnar discovered, were insane. Their history was filled with stories of individuals sacrificing themselves for others. soldiers throwing themselves on explosives to save their companions, parents working themselves to death for their children, strangers running into burning buildings to rescue people they had never met, doctors traveling to dangerous regions to help the sick, teachers staying with frightened students during disasters. It made no logical sense. Self-preservation was the most basic instinct. Every species the Korath had encountered prioritized their own survival above all else. But humans would die for each other without hesitation. They would die for strangers. They would die for people they had never even met. And it wasn't just family. Humans would bond with almost anything. They kept animals as companions, not for food or labor, but for emotional comfort. They formed attachments to machines, giving them names and treating them as if they had feelings. They talked to their ships, their vehicles, their computers. Some humans even developed emotional connections to plants. They call it pack bonding, the tactical officer explained. It is a social behavior evolved from their primitive ancestors. Humans who cooperated survived better than humans who fought alone, but the behavior has become extreme. Extreme how? A human who has bonded with another being will often prioritize that being's welfare over their own survival. They experience physical distress when separated from their bonded companions, and they will fight with unexpected ferocity if those companions are threatened. Vexnar thought about the cargo bay, the young pilot being held in the air, shouting for his captain to escape rather than begging for his own life. The cook tackling an armored warrior. The old engineer swinging his tool at a knee joint he knew was armored, just to create a momentary distraction. How do they defeat this weakness? Vexnar asked. Surely their enemies have exploited this tendency. The tactical officer's scales turned an uncertain yellow. That is the strange thing, Commander. It does not seem to be a weakness. Human military history shows that units with strong social bonds consistently outperform units of individuals. They fight harder. They hold positions longer. They suffer fewer psychological breakdowns under stress. They return to duty after injuries more quickly. That cannot be correct. The data is clear. Humans who fight for each other are more dangerous than humans who fight for themselves. There are records of human soldiers holding impossible positions, refusing to retreat because they would not abandon their companions. They died, but they died together, and they took many enemies with them. Vexnar sat in silence for a long time. He thought about the Korath way of war: individual glory, personal strength, trust no one, depend on no one. And he thought about humans, weak, soft, fragile humans who would walk into certain death for each other, who would stand against 20 armed warriors with nothing but their bodies and their love. Send a message to the Galactic Council, Vexnar said finally. Tell them the human evaluation is complete. What shall I report? Vexnar's scales shifted to a deep, troubled blue. Tell them that humanity should not be conquered. Tell them that humans should be befriended. Tell them, he paused. Tell them that any species that threatens humanity should be warned. When you fight one human, you fight them all, and they fight like family. The message was sent, but Vexnar was not finished with Maria Santos. He returned to the cargo ship personally. The humans watched him with wary eyes, but they did not run. They stood together as they always did, ready to protect each other. James was still limping. Rosa had a bandage on her head, but they were all there and they were all standing. Captain Santos, Vexnar said, I have decided not to report your species as weak. Instead, I will recommend friendly relations. Maria nodded slowly. Thank you. I did not do it out of kindness. I did it because I am afraid. The words hung in the air. The Korath warriors who had accompanied Vexnar shifted uncomfortably. Fear was not something a Korath commander admitted. It was not something a Korath commander felt. You are afraid of us? Maria asked. I am afraid of what you represent, Vexnar said. We Korath are strong alone. We have conquered many peoples, but you humans, You are never alone. You carry each other in your hearts. You fight for each other with a ferocity that we cannot match. Because for us, battle is about glory. For you, it is about love." He turned to leave, then stopped. "I have one question, Captain, if you will answer it." "Ask." "How do you do it? How do you form these bonds? How do you learn to care for others more than yourself?" Maria smiled that strange, sad, fierce smile again. "You just decide to, Commander. You decide that someone matters to you. You show up for them when they need you. You remember their birthdays and their fears and their hopes. You listen when they're sad and celebrate when they're happy. And one day you realize that their happiness is your happiness. Their pain is your pain, and you would do anything to protect them." She gestured at her crew. "These people aren't special. They're ordinary humans who decided to care about each other. That's all it takes." Vexnar stood very still for a moment. Then, for the first time in his life, he did something no Korath commander had ever done. He bowed to a weaker species. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "the Korath have been wrong about many things. Perhaps strength is not found in standing alone." He left the cargo ship. His warriors followed, confused and silent. They had come to intimidate and conquer. They left with something that felt like defeat but wasn't. It was something closer to revelation. 3 months later, Vexnar's report had spread throughout the Korath Empire. It had caused an uproar. Many commanders dismissed it as weakness or madness. Some called for Vexnar's removal. They said he had been corrupted by the humans. They said he was no longer fit to lead. But others began to pay attention. The story of the cargo ship spread. 12 unarmed humans who would not break. A captain who looked a Korath commander in the eye and told him to be afraid. A crew that fought not to win, but to protect each other. A young pilot who shouted for his friends to save themselves while an enemy held him helpless. It became known as the Wandering Hope Incident, and it changed everything. Korath warriors began to watch human behavior with new interest. They observed how humans interacted with each other, with their animals, with their machines. They saw the way humans would share food with strangers, the way they would stop to help someone in distress, the way they formed connections with almost anything that crossed their path. It was terrifying, and it was beautiful. Krathvex, the warrior who had led the boarding party, found himself unable to stop thinking about what he had witnessed. He had fought many enemies. He had respected some and despised others, but he had never been confused by an enemy before. The humans hadn't fought to win. They had fought to protect, and when they were beaten down, they got up again, not for themselves but for each other. Krathvex requested a transfer to the diplomatic corps. It was an unusual request for a warrior, but Vexnar approved it. "Someone needs to study these creatures," he said. "Someone needs to understand them before we face them in real battle." "You think there will be real battle?" "I think," Vexnar said slowly, "that we should do everything in our power to make sure there is not." Krathvex was assigned to the first Korath delegation to Earth. He was nervous, another new feeling, but also curious. He wanted to see where these strange, terrifying creatures came from. He wanted to understand them. Earth was not what he expected. It was a chaotic world, covered in different climates and ecosystems. Mountains and oceans and forests and deserts, all on one small planet. The humans had not unified under a single government. They still fought among themselves sometimes. They disagreed about politics and religion and economics. In many ways, they seemed just as divided as the Korath. But there was something different. Krathvex watched a human city for 3 days. He saw a child fall in a public square, and 5 strangers immediately moved to help. He saw humans form lines to donate blood for people they would never meet. He saw an old human feeding birds in a park, talking to them as if they were friends. He saw a fire break out in a building, and humans ran toward it rather than away. They ran toward danger to pull strangers out of the flames. They burned themselves saving people they did not know. They bond with everything, he reported to his superiors, even their enemies. There are stories of human soldiers caring for wounded prisoners of war. There are stories of humans adopting animals that tried to hurt them. They cannot seem to help themselves. That is weakness, one of his superiors said. No, Krathvix replied. That is something else entirely. He thought about his own childhood. Korath children were raised in competition. They fought each other for food, for status, for recognition. The weak were culled. The strong survived alone. There was no room for softness or connection. No one held you when you were scared. No one told you it would be okay. Human children were raised differently. They were held and comforted and told they were loved. They were taught to share, to cooperate, to help others. They grew up surrounded by affection. And they became the most dangerous species in the galaxy. Not because they were strong, not because they were fast or clever or well-armed, but because they would never, ever abandon each other, because they would fight to the last breath for someone they loved, because they had learned from their first moments of life that they were not alone. Krathvex began to understand something that Vexnar had only glimpsed. The Korath way of strength was hollow. They had conquered 17 species, yes, but they had no joy. They had no connection. They lived and died alone, surrounded by rivals and enemies. The humans lived and died together, surrounded by family. Krathvex made a decision. It was a radical decision, one that would have been impossible before the Wandering Hope incident. He approached a human diplomat named David Park and asked to learn about human customs. David was surprised but pleased. Over the following weeks, he taught Krathvex about human culture, about holidays and celebrations, about friendship and love, about the simple acts of kindness that bound humans together. He taught him about birthdays and weddings and funerals. He taught him about sports teams and fan communities. He taught him about the 1,000 ways humans found to connect with each other. It's not complicated, David said one day. They were sitting in a park watching human children play. The children chased each other and laughed and fell down and got up again. We just take care of each other, that's all. When someone is sad, we try to cheer them up. When someone is hurt, we help them heal. When someone is alone, we keep them company. Why? Krathvex asked. What do you gain from it? Everything, David said. When you care for someone, they care for you back, and life becomes less frightening, less lonely. You know that no matter what happens, someone will be there for you. Krathvex watched the children. They were playing a game that involved throwing a ball and chasing each other. They were laughing. When one child fell, the others stopped playing to make sure they were okay. They helped the fallen child up and brushed dirt from their clothes. Among the Korath, Krathvex said slowly, a child who fell would be mocked. Weakness is not tolerated. That sounds terrible, David said. I thought it made us strong. Did it? Krathvex did not answer for a long time. He thought about his own childhood, the loneliness, the constant fear, the knowledge that no one would help him if he failed. He had survived and become a warrior, but had he ever been happy? No, he said finally. I think it made us afraid of weakness, afraid of each other, afraid of caring because caring meant vulnerability. David nodded. We're afraid too. Caring about someone means you can be hurt through them, but we decided that the pain was worth it, that it's better to love and lose than to never love at all. That is a very human philosophy. Maybe, but it's also a choice. Anyone can make it, even you. The words stayed with Krathvex. That night, he did something he had never done before. He contacted Vexnar through a personal channel. Commander, he said, I believe I have learned something important. Report. The humans are not dangerous because of their pack bonding. They are dangerous because they have discovered something we have not. They have discovered that connection makes you stronger, not weaker. That fighting for others gives you purpose that fighting for yourself cannot match. That love is not a weakness to be eliminated, but a weapon to be wielded. Vexnar was quiet for a moment. And what should we do with this information? I believe, Krathvik said carefully, that we should learn from them, that we should try to become like them. That is treason against Korath culture. Yes, Commander, it is. There was a long silence. Krathvex waited for the order to return home in disgrace. He waited for his career to end. He waited for everything he had built to crumble. Instead, Vexnar said something unexpected. I have been thinking similar thoughts. I have been alone my entire life, Krathvex, surrounded by warriors and servants, but alone. I am tired of it. He paused. When you return from your assignment, come to my quarters. I would like to try something the humans call conversation between friends. I would like that, Commander. Vexnar, if we are to be friends, you should call me by my name. It was a small thing, a tiny change, but Krathvex felt something shift in his chest, something warm and unfamiliar. It felt like hope. 5 years after the Wandering Hope incident, the galaxy had changed. The Korath Empire had not fallen, it had not been conquered, it had simply evolved. Slowly at first, then faster, Korath society began to adopt human customs. Warriors formed small groups and called each other friends. Children were raised with more compassion. The brutal competitions of the past were replaced with cooperative challenges. Not everyone accepted the changes. Some Korath clung to the old ways, insisting that individual strength was the only path to power. They called the reformers weak. They called them traitors. Civil conflicts erupted. Blood was shed. But the new way was stronger. Vexnar discovered this during the Battle of Karath Prime. His ship was ambushed by a fleet of traditionalist Korath rebels. He was outnumbered 3-1. By all logic, he should have died. The traditionalists were fierce warriors, trained in the old ways, fighting for individual glory. Instead, his crew fought like humans. They did not fight for glory. They fought for each other. When a warrior fell, others moved to protect them. When a section of the ship was breached, crew members from other sections rushed to help. They worked together, communicated constantly, and refused to abandon anyone. Medical team to Section 4, a warrior called out during the battle. Krathmer is injured. In the old days, no one would have responded. An injured warrior was a weak warrior. But now, 3 crew members immediately moved to help, protecting their fallen comrade while others continued the fight. The traditionalist fleet had never seen anything like it. They expected the usual Korath tactics, each ship fighting alone, each warrior seeking individual glory. Instead, they faced a united force that moved like a single organism. Ships coordinated their attacks. Warriors covered each other's weaknesses. Vexnar's fleet won. The traditionalists were routed, and the story of Karath Prime spread across the empire, just as the Wandering Hope story had spread years before. We won because we cared, Vexnar said in his victory speech. We won because we would not abandon each other. We won because we are family now. Krathvex, now an ambassador, brought the news to Earth. He met with Maria Santos, who had become something of a legend among those who studied human-Korath relations. News services across the galaxy had told her story. Schools taught about the Wandering Hope incident. Your people have changed, Maria said. She was older now, her hair fully white, but her eyes were still bright and unafraid. She still had that fierce look that had made Krathvex doubt himself for the first time. Your people changed us, Krathvex replied. You showed us what we were missing. They were sitting in a small cafe in Buenos Aires. Maria had retired from space travel and now spent her days teaching at a university. Students came from across the galaxy to learn from the woman who had faced down the Korath Empire with nothing but her family at her side. Her old crew members visited often. They had scattered across the planet, starting families and building lives, but they still came together every year to celebrate their bond. James had married and had 3 children. Old Chen had finally retired. Rosa's restaurant was famous. but they never forgot where they came from. They never forgot each other. "I didn't do anything special," Maria said. "I just refused to let my people get hurt." "That was special, Captain. Among the Korath, your behavior was unimaginable. You were willing to die for others. That concept, it shattered our understanding of warfare." Maria laughed. "It's not warfare, it's just love. I loved my crew, still do. And when you love someone, protecting them isn't a sacrifice, it's a privilege." Krathvex considered this. He had spent 5 years among humans and was still learning their ways, but he understood more now than he had at the beginning. He understood that the human capacity for connection was not a weakness to be overcome. It was a strength to be cultivated. "I have been meaning to tell you something," he said. "After Kareth Prime, Vexnar sent me a message. He said that during the battle, when he thought he might die, he was not afraid of death. He was afraid of never seeing his friends again." Maria smiled. "That sounds right." For a Korath commander to admit fear was once unthinkable. For him to admit that his fear was for others, not himself. Krathvex shook his head. "Your species has worked miracles, Captain." "No miracles, just common sense. People do better when they're not alone. Anyone can see that." "We could not see it, we were blind." "But you're not blind anymore." Krathvex looked out the window at the busy street. Humans walked past in groups, laughing and talking. A parent carried a child on their shoulders. 2 old friends sat on a bench, sharing lunch. A young couple held hands as they walked. Everywhere he looked, he saw connection. "Tell me about your crew," he said. "Where are they now?" Maria's face lit up. "James is a pilot instructor now. He teaches young cadets and tells them stories about our adventures. He always says the most important lesson is to never leave your crew behind. Old Chen retired to a farm on Mars, can you believe it? A farm on Mars. He grows vegetables and sends them to Rosa. Rosa opened a restaurant in Neo-Tokyo. Her cooking is famous across 3 star systems. Politicians and diplomats fight for reservations. You keep in touch with all of them." "Of course, we talk every week, sometimes more." Maria's voice softened. "They're my family. Distance doesn't change that. Time doesn't change that. Once someone is in your heart, they're there forever." Krathvex felt the familiar warmth in his chest. He had learned to recognize it now. It was the feeling of belonging, of mattering to someone. "I have never thanked you properly," he said, "for what happened on the Wandering Hope, for not fighting back with weapons, for showing us another way." Maria reached across the table and touched his scaled hand. The gesture would have horrified a traditionalist Korath. Physical contact between species was considered degrading, but Krathvex did not pull away. He let her touch him, and he felt something he had never felt in all his years of battle. He felt safe. "You don't need to thank me," Maria said. "Just keep learning, keep growing, keep teaching your people that it's okay to care about each other." "I will." "And Krathvex?" "Yes." "Consider yourself part of my family now. If you ever need anything, if you're ever in trouble or scared or lonely, you call me. Understand?" Krathvex stared at her. In all his years of life, no one had ever offered him such a thing. Not his commanding officers, not his fellow warriors, not even his blood relatives. This small, fragile human was offering him unconditional love. "I understand," he said. His voice was rough. "And you are part of my family as well, Captain. If you ever need anything from the Korath Empire, you only need to ask." Maria squeezed his hand. "See, that's how it works. That's how bonds are formed. You just decide that someone matters and you show up for them, again and again, no matter what." "It seems so simple." "It is simple. The hardest things usually are." They sat together in the cafe as the sun set over Buenos Aires. 2 beings from different worlds, from species that had almost gone to war, joined now by something stronger than treaties or trade agreements. Joined by friendship. Joined by love. The Korath had learned to fear human pack bonding. They had discovered that humans fight like family, with a ferocity and dedication that no amount of individual strength could match. But what they learned later was more important. They learned that pack bonding was not something to fear. It was something to aspire to, because when you bond with others, you become more than yourself. You become part of something larger, something that can survive any battle, endure any hardship, overcome any obstacle. You become family, and family never fights alone. 10 years after the Wandering Hope incident, the Galactic Council held a special ceremony. Representatives from 100 species gathered in the Great Chamber on Station Prime, the central hub of galactic civilization. Flags and banners hung from every surface. Music played from a dozen different traditions. They were there to honor Maria Santos and her crew. Maria walked down the central aisle in her old captain's uniform, worn but clean. Behind her walked her crew, James, now in his 30s with gray at his temples. Rosa, larger than ever, beaming with pride. Old Chen, bent with age but still sharp-eyed. The others followed, each one older, each one marked by time and experience. They walked together as they always had, as they always would. Vexnar stood at the podium. He was old now too, his scales faded to a soft gray. But he stood tall, and when he spoke, his voice was strong. 12 years ago, he said, my warriors boarded a small cargo ship called the Wandering Hope. We expected to find weak creatures, easily conquered. Instead, we found something that changed our understanding of the universe. He looked at Maria. We found family. The chamber was silent. Species that had been enemies for centuries sat together, listening. Humans taught us that strength is not found in standing alone. They taught us that the bonds between beings are not weaknesses to be exploited, but foundations to be built upon. They showed us that love, strange, irrational, beautiful love, is the most powerful force in the galaxy. He stepped down from the podium and walked to where Maria stood. He knelt before her, as he had done once before on her cargo ship. Captain Maria Santos, he said, on behalf of the Koreth Empire, I thank you. You showed us another way. You showed us how to be family. Maria smiled that old, fierce smile. Stand up, Vexnar. Family doesn't kneel to family. He stood, and then, in front of 100 watching species, the old Koreth commander embraced the small human woman. The galaxy would remember that moment for generations to come. The Wandering Hope was preserved as a museum ship. It hung in orbit around Earth, visited by millions every year. Inside its old cargo bay, a plaque had been installed. It read, "Here, 12 ordinary humans showed the galaxy that love is the greatest weapon, not because it destroys, but because it refuses to be destroyed." Below the plaque was a list of names, 12 names, ordinary people who had done an extraordinary thing simply by refusing to abandon each other. And next to the human names, a new addition, Krathvex of the Koreth Empire, Vexnar of the Koreth Empire, the first non-humans to be officially adopted into the Wandering Hope family. Krathvex visited the ship every year on the anniversary of that first meeting. He would stand in the cargo bay and remember the fear, the confusion, the moment when he first realized that everything he knew about strength was wrong. And he would smile in his strange Koreth way and feel grateful for the tiny cargo ship and its fierce captain who had changed his life forever. The galaxy was different now, still dangerous, still full of conflict and competition, but also fuller of hope, because if the Koreth could learn to love, anyone could. Species that had been enemies for millennia were learning to cooperate. The old ways of conquest and domination were slowly giving way to trade and alliance. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever was, but it was better. And it had all started with 12 ordinary people who refused to abandon each other. That was humanity's greatest gift to the universe. Not technology or resources or military might. Just the simple truth that they had carried in their hearts since the beginning of their species. We are stronger together. We fight for each other. We are family. And family is forever. Maria Santos passed away peacefully 20 years after the Wandering Hope incident, surrounded by her crew, her family, in her small apartment in Buenos Aires. She was 93 years old. Her last words were simple: "Stay together." Her funeral was attended by representatives from every known species in the galaxy. Krathvex spoke at the ceremony, his old voice breaking with emotion. She taught us that there is no enemy so great it cannot be transformed into a friend. There is no darkness so deep it cannot be illuminated by love. There is no being so alone they cannot find family. He looked at the gathered crowd, humans and Korath and dozens of other species, all standing together. She asked us to stay together. Let us honor her by keeping that promise, not just today, not just tomorrow, forever. The crowd bowed their heads. Different species, different cultures, different histories, but in that moment they were all family. Because that's what Maria Santos had taught them. That's what humanity had taught them. And the galaxy would never be the same.